What's going on, everyone? It's Chris Gunzz. Welcome to another Chris Gunzz Boxing Show, and I have a really special guest, someone I'm really happy to finally be talking to. It's been a long time since I wanted to do this, and with the way things were going, I'm really happy that I have him on the show now, and I know a lot of people out there are going to be happy to hear from my next guest. He's a guy who captured the hearts of a lot of people. He competed in the 1988 Olympics, and he captured the hearts of the public as he fought some of the toughest fights of his life on network television, the USA Tuesday Night Fights. Always tough, always gave everything he had. He's the Bulldog. He earned that nickname. Great career. A great guy who wore his heart on his sleeve every time he was in the ring, and he never disappointed. Scotty the Bulldog Olson. Doing okay now. I'm really happy to have you on the show. How's it going, Scotty?
Things are great, Chris. Just a pleasure to be for me being on this show. It's a little bit of a slow progress. You go from a couple weeks ago not supposed to really being here to still being here. So I am above the snow, and that's at least I have a chance. And but no, I appreciate those little accolades there. That was very nice. Thanks for making my day.
Yeah, my honor, and let me tell you, I reached out to you over a year ago. I wanted to talk to you that long ago, and it's a conversation that I've been wanting to have, like I said, and I'm just happy to have you on now. Tell me about that horrifying thing that people always wonder. People always wonder, will it happen to them, and what it feels like. You recently, for anyone who doesn't know and doesn't follow up on news of the sport, you had a heart attack a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, and it was reported that you were in really bad condition, and it really scared the people who cared about your career and cared about you as a person. Tell us what it was like going through that, and was there any sign of it before that?
That's a very good question, Chris, and there weren't. I didn't have any signs. I don't remember the day before, maybe 2 days before the event. There was one of my friends had a birthday party, one of my boxing friends here at Edmonton. I went to the party, and I came back home at about 9, and by about 2 o'clock, which would have been January 18th, which would have been the Sunday morning, I complained of a sore arm to my wife, a sore left arm, and I went into the restroom, and then I collapsed on the floor, and she couldn't really open up the door, and I was trapped between the bathtub and the toilet, so they couldn't get me out of there. So I was a little bit of a mess there, and of course I wasn't talking, and I was unconscious, so it was a lot of dead weight that she had to pull, and she was able to start some compressions on my chest. She didn't do any mouth-to-mouth stuff, but just compressions on my heart. And during that period of time, I had my daughter calling 911 for emergency to get an ambulance over. So I just wasn't breathing, and there was no pulse, so she kept doing it for about, 12, 13 minutes before the ambulance came. And I guess once they got in, they brushed my wife out of the way, and they shocked me with the paddles a couple times here in the house, and then a couple more on the way to the hospital. So they were having a hard time getting my heart started. So yeah, it came, really without warning. And had I not been at home under these ideal circumstances, for sure it would have been a very, very different outcome, and it would have been, we would have been talking about obituary stuff and not a success story today.
Well, thank God that's not the case. Thank God, But how long were you not alert for?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How long before you gained your consciousness again? How long were you not alert?
It happened on the 18th, and because I hadn't had any oxygen for about 12, 13 minutes until the ambulance came, maybe a little bit longer than that, they put me into a induced coma for 2 days to try to, they cooled my body temperature, my core temperature down, put me in this induced coma so that maybe there'd be a chance that I wouldn't suffer as much or not as much brain damage through the lack of oxygen. So yeah, so that was a big part, and that was a couple days doing that, and I probably the third, probably the fourth day, so that would be, I think by Thursday, I sort of must have been recognizing some people coming in.
And when you finally did come to, what was that like?
Well, not very good for the people that were there. Well, they didn't know I was going to. Well, they weren't very optimistic that I would survive it. First of all, so the doctors are telling my family, not only may I not survive, but if I do wake up, how much cognitive recognition and will I still be able to speak? Will my thoughts and everything be in place? And they couldn't, guarantee any of that. So it was quite stressful, and then stressful on the staff too, because you have family members and people that are close to me that care and want to know a certain answer, and they can't really get it as quick and as clear and understanding for them as they want. And I accused the hospital of running out of oxygen. so I guess I put a damper on their day too. Well, it's not rocket science, I guess I said. Well, you at least get me some oxygen. You shouldn't have ran out.
Did you remember anything that you went through that sent you to the hospital right away?
No. That's the thing. With fighting, I'd break my hand, fight through a broken hand. I'd hurt myself, break my nose, or my eye gets swollen up shut, things like that, and then I just fight through it, and I'm good. But I know what's going on. This one was so strange. I just had absolutely no control over it. But the one thing I do know that it just was not even close to being my time. I figured that if something happened, along these lines ever, I'd probably have one of those. I thought I'd have one of those out-of-body experiences or something, and it wasn't even close to that. So, God must have figured I had a few more things to do here.
Yeah, that's the question everyone wants to know. Is there something? You saw nothing, though? Maybe it was just that you didn't get a chance to see it, and thankfully for that.
Yeah, it's... I've had some dreams, before that brought me to tears, and this was just a little different. I think God knew that I was going to get out of it, and He was in control of that, and He put me into the perfect circumstances. If I'd been outside, if I'd been just in my garage, if I hadn't been home from the party yet, if any one of those didn't fall right into place, I certainly would not have been here. 100% wouldn't have been here. From what the doctor said, and my wife saved my life, so I have to kind of deal with that for a little while, and she was just a blessing for me. There must be too many things for me to do down here before I start seeing any white lights.
Yeah, and tell me about your family, and what did they tell you when they knew that they would have you around for a little more time? They didn't know. The doctors told them to be wary because they don't know how you'll be, either physically or mentally, when you came through, because you were out for so long. But when they did know that you had your mental capacity still there and your physical capacities coming back and getting stronger and stronger, I'm sure, what did they tell you when they finally got a chance to talk to you, your wife and your daughter?
Slowly, once I started to recognize a little bit, I knew I was in the hospital, but I didn't really know why right away. It took me that extra couple days just to get that sorted out. So I didn't know how serious it was, and I didn't quite realize what the fuss was about. I didn't really know what happened, so I knew I'd been in the hospital lots before, but at this point I didn't know how extreme the circumstances were. So it was a little hard family-wise, to relate to me, because they were so protective of me, and I don't like to have people doting over me too much, or doting over me, and being so concerned about me all the time. So evidently it was just a little more severe than I had known right at that time. So they tried to they smiled and I could see some tears, but I could just see this concern in their face and tired faces that just looked tired and tired and stressed. And so that was a little bit different to wake up to. Yes.
Yeah. And in retrospect, and I know you mentioned that you did feel pain in your arm.
Yeah.
Men are always the types that wait till the very last moment before they go to the hospital for the most part. That's how most men are. There was never any sign before that? No chest pains, no little feeling? No, nothing, huh?
No, not a darn thing. So, not only that, well, I knew from my dad, and in my family, we've always had high blood cholesterol, elevated levels of that, and my dad had a heart attack, his dad had a heart attack. So it's kind of a lot of things in the family. And I knew my cholesterol was high. I was on some cholesterol-lowering medication. But when I guess when I complained to my wife, I don't remember complaining to my wife that I had a sore arm. And then I was there and I just collapsed. So I don't remember saying that. I don't remember that full day, maybe day and a half or two prior to that. So, yeah, it was just I wish I could say there was a certain tightness or, I noticed this and then we were able to call 911 but I was just not aware of anything. I complained to my wife of my sore arm. I didn't remember saying that. I went to the restroom and then I was in my heart, I guess, just was stopped and my breathing stopped all at the same time. So that just kept me going. So you can't keep the bulldog down for too long, I guess.
Yeah, you can. And the boxing world's happy. The bulldog is still here. Of course, it can't compare to the joy that your family has for you. That's a much more personal level. But who did you hear from in the boxing world when you did come to? Did anyone surprise you or let you reach out to you that you didn't expect to hear from?
Yeah, well, not that I didn't expect to, but I just wasn't. For me, I wasn't expecting the response that I've had. I put a little thing on Facebook, and I wasn't expecting 1,000 or 1,500 people commenting or posting likes or cheering me on or to send their best wishes to pray for me. I was not expecting things up to that level. I mean, I wouldn't say completely out of the limelight, but a little different than when you're in the ring on a regular basis. So a little bit out of the limelight, I think. And I just wasn't expecting as many people. And Facebook, for example, opens it up from one side of the world to the other. So it's not just an Edmonton thing. So when you have people people that enjoyed watching you fight from the UK and from Britain and from Australia and all over the place, Mexico, it was very flattering in that respect that they cared enough to post a little thing. And now to be on your show and to have this out in the USA, that's what a true blessing it is for me. I've been a little bit out of the United States market for a little bit and really happy to be on your show, Chris.
You had, believe me, the pleasure's all mine. I loved your career. Every time you were in the ring, you couldn't turn your head away. It was nonstop action. And you're a guy that fought most of your fights in the States, despite coming from Canada. And the American fans and Mexican fans know their sport better than anybody, I'm sure. And everybody loved you, and I'm sure everybody's glad you're okay. So believe me, the pleasure's all mine, Scotty.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Tell me about growing up in Edmonton. I mean, you come up, we're glad that you're okay and you get a chance to tell your life story. What was it like growing up in Edmonton?
Well, I was so short. I was a fairly aggressive, kind of a tough kid, but one that didn't have any athletic ability and, tried a lot of sports out. And once I finally tried boxing that I wasn't allowed to do for a few years before I was able to go down. With boxing, it was just something that I was just good at right away. I could naturally take a punch, and I naturally transferred my weight. So I wasn't afraid to take a shot, and I naturally transferred my weight. So I had power that was above and beyond like any 95-pounder that would be out there. Thus, when I would fight, and I would hurt these guys, I'd always say a prayer that I didn't want to hurt anybody, and there goes stopping these kids left, right, and center, and they hadn't seen 100-pound fighters knock each other out before. So I got a lot of acclaim through in Canada very quickly. This is pretty much everything I went into, any competitions, Canadian championships and so on. Whatever I entered, I won. So it was, I was quite popular here in my hometown as a result of a very good exposure media-wise. The media always took their time to include me in maybe the odd little paragraph, and it exponentially got stronger and stronger and bigger and a larger following than what a lot of fighters were able to obtain.
Yeah, I'm 38 now, and I started loving the sport when I was about 6, when my grandfather started putting me in front of the television to watch it, and I could go down a list of hundreds of things that I love about the sport, and one of the things that I love about it is that there's a weight class for everybody. I'll see kids, little tiny kids playing basketball who clearly won't be able to do anything with that skill, whatever they can do when they become full height. And in boxing, there will be a place for you to compete in. So I wish that boxing would get more attention in the newspapers the way it used to, and more people would get involved in it. But tell me about, you mentioned how you weren't really athletic. How old were you when you first did find boxing?
I was about 13, about 12 and a half, 13, and my parents my mom bought me a heavy bag, so they set it downstairs in the basement, but I lived in this townhome, so I had somebody like right next to us, but it hung downstairs, and when I would hit the heavy bag would hit the deep freeze, and they would make a lot of noise, especially next door. But what I was doing was skipping school to hit the heavy bag because I got told on a bunch of times. So I'd hit the heavy bag would hit the deep freeze, make a racket, and thus I wasn't at school. I was hitting the bag all day, and only using my right hand as well. And so my mom finally said, okay, if you stay in school, at least go to school, I'll let you try boxing. And that's when she let me go down, and I fell in love with it right away. I wanted to, just be like Rocky Marciano and Ray Mancini. There was a few fighters that were pretty instrumental in my career.
Yeah, and tell me about the Olson household. You mentioned your mother? I always go and try to see a few interviews that maybe you did, and you mentioned your mom before. Was your dad around, and did you have any siblings?
Well, first of all, my dad was around. My parents were divorced when I was pretty young, about five or so years old. So then I had a stepdad at that time. He's now deceased, but he was around for a few years there too, until I was in grade maybe 8 or 9 or so. So I had a little bit of a time until I at least started boxing. I would say till I was about 15, 16, he was around. But my dad was always around. Like he wasn't together with my mom, but he never neglected me whatsoever. He was the best dad of all time. It's just and just a short, tough guy like I was, and real tough nut, and So and then I have 2 older brothers, Mike and Chris, and they're just they're lovely. They've always been very protective, and it's been hard. They didn't have quite the opportunities that I had, because I was sort of the last one, and a lot of attention and time was placed on me trying to obtain my goals. And they had the support, the network of support that I had. I'm sure they would have done even better than I would have done in life. So I've always had a bit of a struggle there. It's like if you go on a plane and the plane crashed, but you survived, and then you have that guilt feeling that why did I survive and some people didn't. Yeah. Well, I kind of survived through some tough things between my family, and my brothers weren't able to get as much attention as I did, and I always feel a little, that was a tough one for me. But they've been just so supportive, and never made me feel, upset about it.
That's great. And you mentioned how you were good right away when you started boxing. Yeah. It came natural to you. You had a great amateur career. I know you were a gold medalist at the Commonwealth Games in 1986. Tell us about that gold medal victory and where it was held, and tell us about the whole tournament.
Well, that tournament was, I figured, I'm Canadian champion for a handful of years in a row, and I might as well win the Commonwealth Games gold medal. So, I set my sights toward it, but I wasn't one of the more prominent fighters being looked at going into the Commonwealth Games. We had Lennox Lewis, Egerton Marcus, we had Asif Dar, we had one of the Downey fighters that was from Eastern Canada, like from Halifax. And, I was in the mix, but, I don't think they thought that much of me. They knew I was kind of tough, but, so anyway, I wasn't getting all the recognition leading up to it. So in the first fight, I was able to win against Northern Ireland, I guess was the first guy. I must have had a bye or something in the first round, because I should have had 3 fights, but anyway, I only had 2. Then I won 1 fight. That was pretty easy. I stopped that kid. Then I fought England in the final, and he was better than me, but I knocked him down a couple times. I think it was about the second round. Knocked him down really, really good, and I think he still won the third round, but I was able to get the decision. So winning that fight, and to whether it being in the United States, and I would have honored that as well, had they been competing, or if I was fighting for the States at that time. But to see the standing on a podium and then watching the Canadian flag rise, while the songs are going off, that kind of, as tough as I was, I did cry. That meant a lot to me. And after that tournament, it was that tournament that sort of put me on the map, that I was somebody to focus their attention on, and the media then focused on me a lot more than what they had.
Mm-hmm. And you went to the 1980 Olympics in Seoul, Korea.
Yeah.
An Olympics that gave birth to some of the greatest, some of the toughest, and some of the most exciting fighters that came around in the sport in the whole history of it. In the Olympics is special to everyone who had the chance to compete in it. What was the atmosphere like when you did get to the Olympics, you got to Seoul, and you see the pageantry that goes into it? What was that like?
The build-up was really exciting. I expected. I won everything that I entered, pretty much. And so I figured, I won the Commonwealth Games gold medal. Now let's win the Olympic Games gold medal. Just well. Always, I might as well do that. So I had no idea that I wasn't going to win. So it was kind of funny, because I won one fight. I just stretched this guy from Papua New Guinea, not the boxing capital of the world, but he was left-handed. I crunched him with the right hand. It was one of the best knockouts that I've actually seen on tape for quite a while, too. It was a beautiful shot. So I knocked that guy out. Then I fought another kid who ended up becoming a world champion, Wayne McCullough from Ireland. Yep. I don't know if you heard of him. And anyway, I fought him. I beat him and dropped him with a body shot at probably the second round or so. And after that, I went into the final with, my last fight, which would have been a quarterfinal fight against Michael Carbajal, who from the States, who I'd beaten once before and lost to him twice before as an amateur fighter. So, for the build-up of the Olympics, all that is exciting. But Carbajal ended up edging me out on points in the Olympics. So, not achieving that goal, it kind of had destroyed my world for a while. I didn't know how to accept something less than a win. It was pretty tough for me to digest that one.
Yeah. So it did bother you a lot. That is something you want. No.
That was a hard one. I thought I lost a little bit. Every athlete, I think, has their own, reasons, excuses. I could say all my reasons, and they would just come out as excuses. Bottom line is, I lost the fight. So, that was, and I think I could have, under normal circumstances, I could have won, but it didn't come. But then I knew I would have lost the gold medal for sure, as Michael Carbajal did as well. He got the silver medal at the Olympics. Just prior to the Olympics, leading up to the Olympics, Team Canada went to Bulgaria, and I fought this Bulgarian fighter, and I just could not catch this rascal. He was about, I swear he was about 40 years old, which is pretty old at that time, for when you're about 22, 23, whatever I was. And they had this, it was sort of an outdoor show, and they had this gong, one of those big gong. I don't know if you ever watched the Gong Show, but the big gong, and every time I would miss, somebody would boom, and they hit this gong. And I was absolutely in tears, because I never hit this rascal once. And he went to the distance, and I'm in tears. I was so frustrated. All I wanted to do was put my hands on him. And he ended up getting the decision. And right after that, I see him drinking a beer and having a cigarette. I say, who is this cat? Here I'm doing all these things, trying to make myself the best fighter possible, maybe with limited ability, but he got away with everything. And he was the one that ended up beating Michael Carbajal in the final for the gold medal. So I was kind of glad I didn't have to fight him again. I was really happy. I wouldn't have wanted to see that one on TV. Oh, brutal.
So in retrospect, though, there's nothing to hold your head down about. I mean, you beat the pocket rocket Wayne McCullough, losing to Michael Carbajal. Anyone who knows 1990s boxing knows those two names. Wayne McCullough actually stuck around and went to the following Olympics in Barcelona, where he won silver, and Michael Carbajal won silver. So there's nothing to hang your head low about. Those are two great fighters, and you're just another one in the mix with them. Did you realize how good these two guys were in the amateur level in the Olympics?
I never. For Michael, I knew he was a good fighter. I knew he was a good fighter, but I never thought of myself not being at that level or higher in the amateur game. I never thought I was not one tad bit lower. I expected to beat him if I ever fought him. I know we fought here in Edmonton. I beat him, and then we fought in North Carolina on a USA Canada dual meet, and he edged me on point and said, I thought I won that one. And then we fought in the Olympics, and then of course we fought once as a pro, and you fight people of that caliber that end up being I'm in like the Alberta Boxing Hall of Fame. I'm very proud of it. It's a very big honor for me. A guy like Carbajal, Chiquita Gonzalez, those guys are in the World Boxing Hall of Fame, and kind of nice to have felt I was at that level of that caliber of opposition.
Yeah. Yep. And we know you've been to Seoul, you've been to many places in the world competing at the highest level in the amateurs. Not everybody who were your same age, your peers, had a chance to travel as much as you did because of boxing. Where are some of the other places you had a chance to see that people your own age never would have had a chance to see?
Well, yeah, most of it was just as an amateur fighter. We'd go in tournaments. A lot in Europe. I've been to Bulgaria a couple times, been to Greece, been to Poland a couple times, and then some of the surrounding countries that are sort of in that mix. And of course, Britain. Probably one of my better fights was in a country called Indonesia. It was called, where was I? I was in Jakarta, Indonesia, and they had, the first time, I went there twice. The first time, I was, a smaller fighter, and I was stretching everybody, knocked everybody out. Like an Indonesian guy and then a Russian guy, and there's a few other guys that just knocked everybody out. So what do they give me? A big trophy at the end of the day. It was the most popular fighter of the tournament. And it's kind of cool. I still have a little picture of myself and another fighter named Costa Zoo. I don't know if you might have heard of him. He fought a few of my friends. He was 140-pound junior welterweight world champion.
Yep.
Costa Zoo. So we were on the same sort of podium as myself, and I had a bigger trophy than he did. But he was the best fighter of the tournament, but I was still the most popular. So but I was at my best at that tournament. I was just stretching everybody, absolutely no fear, and I wish I could have been on weight and on task, throughout my whole career like that. It would have been a rock star. Just would have been a rock star career.
Yeah, I understand. But so after the 1980 Olympics, you mentioned how it destroyed you for a while there. Is that why you didn't turn pro right away?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was having fights with my coach. I could have stayed an amateur fighter, fought in more Olympic games. I would have had all of my education paid for. That's what my coach wanted for me, to get my education and, fight amateur, continue that, still be a part of the game. And so did my mom want. She wanted that too. And I wanted to turn pro. I was a fighter. But here I am. There weren't that many great Canadian fighters really at that time. That not a lot of fight cards to be on, and nobody really thought I could do it. We tried to form a corporate syndicate here in Edmonton of a few companies that would allow me a chance to fight, and maybe just not have to fight for $100 a round. Somewhere I could be be afforded the time to make sure I could train properly for the fight, for my and fights, and then I would just be based out of Edmonton. And they all turned me down, so I said, well, my last chance was maybe going down to Vegas. So my coach finally caved in and gave me a couple names of people to see down there, and I was able to get in to Top Rank Incorporated, and without their help, there wouldn't be a Scotty Olson story.
Yeah. And you did turn pro about a year and a half after those Olympics of '88. Yeah. January 28th, 1990, you make your pro debut against 3-0 David Long. What do you remember about that?
Oh, that was a little funny because my manager, and I love him, we talked the other day too, Bruce the Mouse Strauss. He had a lot of fights, and he was my manager, and I think he was bodyguarding for Bob Dylan at that time. So he couldn't he couldn't come to my pro debut, and I'm thinking, just hang on a minute. Okay, I understand I'm with a big promotional company. I love Top Rank. They're treating me just I'm getting it's my pro debut. I get to be a swing fight on an ESPN show. This is great. So I don't know. Typically, I wasn't dumb, but I figured if you're making your pro debut, and I'd seen Carvajal and a few of these other guys make their pro debuts on NBC or ABC or USA Fights or Tuesday Night Fights, and they'd be fighting guys like 1-6 or 2-7. Here I'm fighting a 3-0 guy. So I was a little bit unnerved why I was doing this. And then I can't remember. I think he was Emmanuel Augustus or something like that. I think this guy had about 60 fights, 70 fights. I don't know how many he had. But I was a swing fight, so I had no idea. They were trying to get my fight on TV, so I had no idea when I was going to go on into my first pro debut. So I was just working out and training and shadowboxing, and the guy Augustus said, you might as well just settle down a little bit. You'll be ready when they come get you. You'll be ready. But I didn't listen to him. So and then being a swing fight, all these fights had gone by, and then I put my hands finally in these gloves, and they'd been used by 2 other fighters, so they were wet and heavy. And they weren't 6 or 8 ounce gloves; they were like 10-ounce gloves. Things were huge. And I'm fighting this bigger, more experienced kid who's undefeated, and I'm tired now because I shadow boxed for over an hour and a half, and that was my pro debut. Yeah, I couldn't get him out of there. He survived. I don't know. Yeah.
How'd you like fighting without the headgear?
That felt real natural. I couldn't stand the damn thing. Coming up as an amateur fighter, it helped me a little bit on the cuts. I didn't mind wearing it when I was sparring, but amateur fighting, I was always getting hit quite a bit, and it would always be moving, kind of obscuring my vision. So yeah, I was more defensively minded without it. So it seemed I was able to see a lot better, be a more efficient fighter.
Yeah, I would do training in the boys' club here, and I hated putting the headgear on because every time anyone touched you, you'd have to adjust it again.
Oh yeah.
I hated headgear.
That and they get slimy and
yeah. You think about who wore it before you. But you return less than a month later, and you defeat Ramiro Garcia via 6-round unanimous decision, and then you put on a power display. Showed off a lot of the bulldog in you. You knock out 12 guys straight, and the 12-fight knockout streak was ended when you went 10 full rounds for the first time in your career against Ramon Solis. How did you feel going the full 10-round distance for the first time in your life?
Well, that was a tough one. Yeah. I fought a couple decent guys in there. Just kind of mediocre kind of C kind of fighters is what I would call them. They weren't B or A kind of qualified fighters for the first ones. But my first 2 fights, they go the distance. And I told Top Rank that I was a knockout artist. Here they go the distance. And then in the second fight, I broke my hand. So, I sort of panicked. I know I broke my hand. It's the second fight. Both these guys went the distance. Give me another shot, make sure I can fight again. So they said, sure, you can fight in May. So I had a plate put in my hand, and I had to do my recovery, and I still fought. I think it was the first week or 2 of May, and the fight previous that I broke my hand was nearing the end of February. So yeah, it didn't give me a lot of time to prepare on that one. Then I had that 12-round knockout streak in a row, or 12 of them. And then they kind of put me in. So, and promotional companies should do that. I don't want to have a career based on guys that, of course I'm supposed to beat this guy and that guy, and, I'm supposed to beat those kind of guys at my level. So they put me in with Solis, who had a little bit of a deceiving record as well. What do they call it? Box rec, or anyway, they try to verify records, and you can never verify these guys down in Mexico. It was very hard to, and I fought guys that were 13-5. That by the time a few years of this box rec comes out, then they're at 0-3, which is not true. So just some of them are invalidated. Anyway, Ramon Solis. I knew I was in tough when I saw him get kind of dressed up in a couple days before the fight, and I saw him go for a run. He didn't come back for like an hour and a half. Oh my God, what am I getting into? This guy must be in some shape. So, but anyways, it was the first round, and I flipped his jab, I knocked him down. Beautiful right hand in the first round, just gorgeous, and this was nice because it was in Montana on ESPN. That was a real nice fight. By the 6th round, he had me out on my feet, so I was out. But I came back. By the end of the 6th round, I had it was kind of like one of those Arturo Gatti Ward fights. The 6th round of that fight was sensational, and I was coming back there at the end of it. And then I think I won the rest of the rounds, but I lost for sure one of them, and my eye was completely closed up, and remember it was Al Bernstein, or maybe it was Barry Tompkins, probably Al Bernstein. He'd say, Scotty, like, and with your eye, you obviously couldn't see out of your eye. So how did you find that? And I said something like, well, you could take both of my eyes. You know, I considered it a badge of honor. And you know, so I still had the other one I could see out of, and thank the referee for not stopping the fight because he had lots of opportunities to do so.
Yeah.
You know, so I got a little preferential treatment with getting to know the referees prior to my fights.
Smart man. And your next fight after the Solis fight, you fight a tough Filipino by the name of Dario Andujar. You found yourself in the ring with a really experienced fighter. It was really the first time you saw a guy with that experience, and he actually challenged for a world bantamweight championship after losing to you, and he lost to Victor Rebanales.
Yeah.
But did you feel his professional experience in that fight, and how ready did you feel you were after winning that split decision?
Oh man, like you know, they wanted me to anyway. So I take this fight. I find out from the media guy from Canada who was coming down to broadcast or to cover my fight in Montana there against Andujar, and he says, Scotty, whatever you do, don't take the fight. I looked all up this guy's record, and don't take the fight. Well, I'm here in Montana. I'm a fighter. They got somebody to fight me, and that's what I do for a living, so I'm going to fight him. Oh, no, Scotty, I looked in, he's fought Luisito Espinosa, and he's fought this guy, and he's a former world champion, and this cat had fought a lot of the tougher guys in the Orient leading up to coming to San Francisco, and thus fighting me in probably his second fight in the United States, coming from the Philippines. Tough kid. Man, it was early in the fight, and I was dipped down. I dropped a body shot off with the right hand. I dipped down again, dropped off the right hand to the body. I dipped down one more time, and I came over top, hit him right on the button, right on the chin. Most guys go down from that shot. His head spun around backwards. He looked at me, hit me with an uppercut, damn near killed me. So, and I was that, you know, then I knew, oh my gosh, this is going to be a long night. And I knew that was good. Yeah, I mean, I hit him with my best shot, and this guy damn near took my head off with an uppercut. So, and then instead of, I was scared to death of him. He was so strong, so physically strong. He'd take a shot and he could punch as well, if not maybe a little more precisely than I did, a little more accurately. And I stayed close and I smothered him. I used my strength and my whatever I had to try to wear him down and muscle him down, grind him down. So I was able to do that, and darn it, you know, it was a real close fight at the end, but I did win by a split decision, and that was a good decision for me to get. And to fight at that level, you know, he was 10 times better than anybody else I had fought before. And I remember I was fighting, do you remember little Eddie Cook?
Yeah.
You remember Eddie Cook? He was a bantamweight champion of the world.
Yes, I do. Fast Eddie.
Yeah, Fast Eddie. He was just the loveliest guy. Anyway, remember we were talking about my second pro fight, and I broke my hand in that fight. It went the distance. About a week before my second pro fight, they said, okay, I'll spar with Eddie. So I sparred with Eddie. Now, Eddie was a full-blown bantamweight, so he was real strong. Like he wasn't much bigger than me, but just a little more muscular. And man, being left-handed, he could punch so hard. So in our sparring, I don't know, we went to war for about a round. I just tried to kind of, you know, putz around and try to stay alive a little bit. And then, but the next thing I know, I'm working the heavy bag. So I call up my trainer at the time, Richie Sandoval. I'll say, Richie, come on over here. So Richie says, Scotty, what's up? I said, well, what happened? I was just sparring, wasn't I? Hey, you were sparring. You were working with Eddie Cook, and he put you down. And so I had to stop the sparring session. You're on your third round on the heavy bag. So this is a week before my second pro fight, and Eddie Cook had just knocked me out. So that's coming full circle. So I defeat this Diosdado Andujar who's from the Philippines. He's about like 34 wins, maybe 8 or 9 losses at the time. Great record though, tough fighters in the Orient. So then Eddie Cook's camp said, well, let's go ahead and we'll fight Andujar. Oh, he fought Scotty, and Scotty just barely beat him. But so anyway, Eddie fought him, but Eddie didn't quite take the shots that I did. You know, he could dish it out way better than I could, but I don't think he took it as well as I did. And Eddie got stopped in that fight pretty early.
Yeah. Wow.
And that which is a heartbreaker for me. I would never have taken that fight for Eddie. I wouldn't have taken that one for him. You know, what a sensational little fighter. You know, if anybody should have been in the Hall of Fame right now, in my books.
Yeah, definitely had a lot of people thinking he was definitely on his way there too. You're not the only one. Eddie Cook was a really good fighter, and sometimes a loss could do that. It could derail a seemingly Hall of Fame bound career like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he lost against Andujar, and then he came back, and then he won the bantamweight title against, I think Julio, a Colombian guy, I think it was. Might have been a Colombian guy, anyway. But he ended up being the WBA bantamweight champion for a little bit, and it was him and Vince Phillips and Cool Arthur Williams. You know, myself, I was kind of in the mix, you know, coming up with those guys in the same time at the gym. It was a lot of fun being at that top-ranked gym, I'll tell you. It was sometimes a little bit of a war going in there, but, you know, we came to fight for sure.
And you came out better because of it.
Thank you.
You don't get a chance to see so many people in the flyweight class with speed like Eddie Cook. A lot of them are from Mexico, and they're always tough. They're always tougher than most people are from America. But as far as American skills go, you don't see that much. So you got some really great experience in the top ranked gym.
Yeah. And it was nice watching him.
Yeah. That fight with Andujar was in August 1981, and you still fit in 3 more fights before the year was out, knocking out all 3, and it put you in the ring for your first pro title, the USBA flyweight title versus Pedro Jose Feliciano. Bring me back to that night. You're fighting for your first professional title. Take me back.
Well, it was, you know, the more rounds for me, the better off I was. You know, I always felt 3 rounds in amateur, 6 rounds. And then I kind of didn't have really. I don't think I had an 8-round fight. I might have had one scheduled fight, but I went from 4, and then I did 6, and then I did 10-round fights. And then all of a sudden I was in a 12-rounder, and you know, put me in the ring with anybody for 12 rounds. I'm going to have a little better chance of beating the guy just based on my conditioning and what I can bring to the table. So I don't know. Like, that fight, I just felt pretty destined to win. You know, it was early January. It was the first ESPN show first ESPN show in that year of 92, I guess it might have been 91, 92, I think it was. So I just felt I was going to win, and I prepared really well for it. I was pretty strong for that fight. Had I fought a little bit better, you know, I would have gotten him out of there a lot earlier. I made a few little mistakes that I didn't know that much to I didn't know how to make those adjustments. I didn't make the adjustments very well, so but I ended up getting him out of there in about 8, 9, 10 rounds, something like that. But yeah, that was a highlight. You know, it was finally, you know, a little guy from Canada go down to the States, get an opportunity by one of the biggest promotional companies, Top Rank. I mean, with Bob Arum, Bruce Tramplett, the matchmaker, had Lee Samuels as he was handling all the publicity and PR guy. You know, it was just a rock star team. Have a great gym to train out of. You know, that what a blessing. Without being with Top Rank, without them fighting for me to try to get my fights televised, there just wouldn't be a story for me. I would be known that I was a fighter, but none of my fights would be on had been on television, and Top Rank just took care of me with that for sure. And I hadn't heard back from Top Rank. I hadn't talked to them for a handful of years, so I'm looking forward to giving them a call, letting them know I'm okay in the event that they heard I was sick.
Yeah, and I wish they'd get on the phone and call you. You deserve a phone call. But your memory's great. It was January 1992. You have a great memory. You stopped Feliciano in 9 rounds. And what do you remember about getting the title? Some guys you ask about a USBA title, and they don't put much into the USBA. Some guys think of it just as great as having a world championship. How did you feel getting your first professional belt?
That was icing on the cake for me. Yeah, no, because it wasn't a vacant title. The guy actually had the title. I had to beat him to win it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of nice. It wasn't a vacant one, and I got a chance to fight a little Puerto Rican guy that had fought a couple decent guys. Fought Dave McCauley and went the distance with him, and he was the world champion flyweight, IBF flyweight champion at my weight at that time. You know what? And just before I carry on, I'm just really blessed that I'm able to remember some of this stuff after what I went through a couple weeks ago. So it's if my mind is a little bit off or my speaking is a little slower, I do apologize for that. But for the USBA title, I was just it was a title. They allowed me a chance to fight for a title. Winning that one, I knew that if I didn't get a chance with the WBC or WBA title fight, it would put me in line in the top 3, 4, or 5 in the IBF in line for a title shot. So that was a big stepping stone for me to win that title, which would then open up some other doors if the other champions would give me a title shot.
Yeah, and like I said, so far your memory is on point. No sign of anything that happened 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. So all's good. I'm impressed with your memory. Just even if you didn't have to go through what you went through a couple weeks ago, your memory's great. But you win the title January 1992, and you win 3 more fights that year. But you have one last fight in December 92, and it would be the end of your unbeaten streak, as you would drop a majority decision after 12 rounds to a guy by the name of Jose Luis Zepeda. You enter the ring 23-0, USBA flyweight champion, and you leave the ring with your first loss and no belt. Take me back to that night, and how'd you feel about that one?
Zepeda was just a tough coconut, this guy. I don't think Carbajal even wanted to fight him. He was more kind of that Carbajal's weight, kind of would fight, 105, 108 pounds. I think he had fought Chiquita Gonzalez before as well, and Carbajal, I don't think he wanted any part of him. And then they offered me the fight. I'll fight the guy. Well, I didn't realize his background, but he fought some of the toughest little guys in Mexico, and the only time he really lost, you'd see some losses on his record, but they were because he'd get cuts. He'd get cut up over his eyes, so they'd stop the fight on cuts. Maybe Chiquita Gonzalez might have got him out of there, I would have thought. But anyway, so I said, yeah, I'll fight Zepeda. But the fight before that was, I think, in July, and I fought a kid named Jose Luis Velarde. Now, Velarde, tough kid, and I broke my hand badly in 2 places in about the 4th, 5th round, somewhere around there. And it was pretty bad, so I used my left hand for a couple rounds, and then I dumped him with a left hand to the body, a left hook, caught him in the liver with my left hook, boom, down goes Velarde, so he come back up, and then I used my right hand, even though it was broke so bad, I figured, here's my chance to get him out of here. Well, I used that right hand and dropped him a couple more times. They ended up stopping the fight. Vic Draculich was the referee, great referee, and so I won that fight. So in winning that one, I knew something would be offered, but my hand was broken 2 places. So when I ended up taking the Zepeda fight, the hand wasn't 100% there yet. Not 100. It might have been 85%, wasn't 100% yet. Healed. You get just a little bit older, things would take a little longer to heal. So, and I broke my hand against Peta in the third round, I believe it was, of a 12-round fight. That's a long time, long day at the office to fight a long fight when not only did I break one of the bones in my hand, but all four of my metacarpals, the long bones in my hand, dislocated, went on top of my wrist. So I had to fight like that for the next 9 rounds, of which I would have won the fight a lot easier, but I lost it on a split decision, I guess. Well, I think it was anyway.
Yeah. Did you agree with the decision, or was it you were in so much pain after with your hand?
I was in a lot of pain. Yeah, I was pretty upset about that one. I figured, well, it was kind of co-promoted by the LA Forum and with Top Rank, kind of co-promotion. Mm-hmm. I figured it was co-promoted, and I'm fighting a guy that's, from not kind of a part of either one of the promotional companies, not really a protected fighter in some way. Anyway, I kind of thought that they could have gave us a draw and let us do it one more time, and still would have been a good fight. That's what I would have done.
Yeah.
Instead of ruining somebody, because my next fight was for, I was in line to be the first $1 million flyweight fight with Michael Carball. As I build out to take all this time to go up to 23-0, and then I lose the fight, and that was kind of a heartbreaker there too.
Yeah, that's hard to get over. Would you say that loss was as hard to take emotionally as the loss in the Olympics?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I retired that night. I was sitting down. I had Richie Sandoval. I brought him over, and I brought Mouse over to they put me on a gurney, my hands in a cast, my eyes are all swelled shut. I was peeing blood quite a bit because I don't know, he must have got me in the kidneys just a little bit. So peeing blood, and I was dehydrated, and I was just a mess. I called him over, and I said, Mouse, I said, Richie, this is about it for me. It's been a slice, but I think I'm all done. I'm not going to fight anymore. I got 23-0, and I finally lost the fight, and I thought I should have won, but it was pretty close. But they gave it to the other guy, so I think I'm still with when I lost that one. I had the best sleep of my life, knowing I wouldn't have to do any more road work. Until I woke up the next day and I thought, oh boy, wait till I get to fight somebody again. They're going to get stretched for sure. Yeah. So I woke up, I had that spirit back, but overnight I had the best sleep of my life. Yeah. Knowing I wouldn't have to train anymore.
There's something about seeing your pee being red that makes you want to just give it all up.
Oh yeah, that was enough for me. I couldn't see out of my eyes, my hands. Oh, it was a mess. Like it was just so sore. And as a beta kid, tougher than nails. I was even when I was doing best in a couple of rounds before I broke my hand. I was having a hard time backing him up.
Yeah.
He was just like a cement truck. And then I found out to protect himself from getting stopped on cuts all the time, he had his eyebrows shaved down, stitched back up. So here I'm fighting a guy who's almost reconditioned. He looked like he'd been chasing cement trucks. That's what this guy looked like. He just looked like the epitome of a tough guy fighter. And I can see why some of these guys didn't want any piece of him. Cause, I said, oh my God, what am I in against? But he'd fight like a few pounds lighter than what our weight class was at. And, I figured, I'd have a good shot against him, and I would have killed him had I not broke my hand. But that's okay. It was, a little bad technique is what that was.
And as a boxing fan, through the years, you know that nobody puts out tougher guys than Mexico. It's the toughest bunch of people that ever come in the game. Always tough. 9 out of 10 of them, anyway. Tough guys. And a lot of times highly skilled. And like I said, that was your last fight in 1992, and you'd fight 5 times the following year, winning 4 of them by knockout. And the last fight of the year to Michael Parrish, you won a 10-round decision, so you're 5-0 through 1993. Your first fight in 1994 would be another defeat. You were second. Your second loss of your career. And again, that wasn't a unanimous decision, but it was a split decision. This one to Jorge Luis, what was it, Roma or something?
Roman, yeah.
And you had him down in round 3, and it was close on the scorecards. Did you agree with the decision? And after this defeat, where did you feel you were at that moment? And you just said no, you didn't think you won.
Oh, I won the fight. Yeah, I won the fight. Yeah, that one I should have won for sure. That was, I kind of built myself up to where maybe I wouldn't make $1 million, but maybe in the $700 figure, $700,000 figure to fight Carbajal again. Kind of built myself back to fight Roman, all at the LA Forum, so a big fight show, and I fight Roman. Tough little kid. His brother was a former world champion fighter. Decently tough guy, kind of a C+, maybe B- fighter. But I knocked him down really good. The shot that knocked him down in the 3rd round, well, that broke 2 of my bones, so in my hand. So I was kind of shot with that, but I boxed my butt off. I really did. I really did put on. I went outside of my comfort zone and I boxed the guy, and I thought I did really well. And they gave it to Roman by decision. So in losing that one, but when I won my next following IBO belt, well, then I made my first defense against him. I wanted him back in the ring.
Yeah, and
hello,
Lou.
I was number 2 in the world for a long time, still while I was with Top Rank. And so I'm number 2. I wasn't a mandatory contender, so there's been a couple times. First there was one of you guys named Rodolfo Blanco, was from Colombia, and he was number 2. He was the number 1 guy in the world. Dave McCauley from Ireland was the world champion for the IBF. So here I'm trying to get a title shot. And Top Rank, as far as that I was always told, they had offered Rodolfo Blanco a step-aside fee to allow me to fight Dave McCauley on nationwide TV. I think it was CBS was bringing fights back then. That's where Bob Arum, I think, wanted it to be on. It could be on ESPN or NBC or Tuesday Fights. Anyway, so where was I going with this one? I might have to backtrack a little bit.
With Dave McCauley.
Yeah, so they offered Rodolfo Blanco a step-aside fee, as much as he would make to fight for the title, allow me to fight Dave McCauley for the championship, and then I would just naturally make my first defense against number 1 contender, Blanco. Well, there was a couple times that this happened, and both times the champion knocked out. Both times the number 1 contenders wouldn't allow me to fight for the title. They would. Blanco ended up fighting McCauley, knocked him out. And there was one more guy that ended up fighting for the title, and we tried to give him a step-aside fee too, and he wouldn't buy it. And then I took that loss against Roman, so then I bounced back down to about number 8 in the world. So it was just little things like that that was starting to get to me. I was number 2 in the world quite a while. There's got to be a chance, and I know Mr. Arm was working on Dave McCauley. I think that would have been a really, really exciting, interesting fight, because he was taller and a little bit better than me in a lot of ways, and more of a sharpshooter, now a little bit stronger here and there. But I think that would have been a great fight to have in the United States. That would be just. I was way more popular in the United States than I ever was in Canada.
Yeah. You fought a lot there, and you spent a lot of your time there between fights too, and sparring with the American guys.
Just the people were so nice to me. The biggest thing Michael Buffer would say, ladies and gentlemen in the blue corner, originally from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, now living and training out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and everybody just adopted me at that point. Like, they just forget about Canada. Like, he's ours. We're claiming this cat. So that was cool. I like that.
At that point, though, you always wanted to avenge that Olympic loss to Carbajal, and it would have been great to do it for the $1 million purse that you were going to get, and having to take the loss, the tough first loss with the broken hand, and the tough time during that fight, and then the decision loss that you feel inside that you won to Roman. You still, despite suffering your second loss, you get that shot at Carbajal. Yeah. This time, though, for probably a lot less money than you would have got had you fought him when you were 23-0. But how disappointing was it going into that fight, knowing that you did have the guy that you've been wanting your whole life, but at the same time it was for all that less, and having to go through the politics of boxing. How much of yourself at your very best? You're 23-0 at your very best. How much of your best do you feel you still had going into that fight with Carbajal?
Oh, I fought Carbajal 35%.
No.
Well, I had 2 operations leading up to that fight. I had one on my eye, just to try to keep my eyelid tucked back up because I couldn't see out of it. I had some nerve damage from those Montana fights against Solis and Andor, so I needed to tuck that thing up. And the last one was on my knee, so and that one was really, really fresh. So when I got the call to fight Carbajal, I said, "Great! Carbajal's going to finally fight me right on." How much time do I got? I had like 5.5 weeks. So here I'm 135 pounds. I just had 2 operations. Last one's on my knee. So now I have to not get to 112 pounds. I could barely make that weight, let alone get down to 108 pounds to fight Carbajal. So yeah, that was a lot to go by. So sure enough, I figure I went down to Vegas and I talked to the doc, and he would take this real thick gauge syringe, and he'd pull out all the syringe out all the fluid in my knee, and then dump some cortisone in it so I could train for a handful of days. Then they'd do it again and again and again just to keep that thing going. So that was. But not only could I not train really hard to get into really good shape, I couldn't train hard to lose the weight. So I went on a protein diet. So I didn't eat anything but eggs and meat and stuff like that for like at least 5 weeks. I was just dead. I was tired climbing up those ropes, and I actually made 108 pounds. But I figure I usually make the 108 pounds. I would make my weight in a bathtub, so I'd put the hot water in the bathtub, I'd slip down in the bathtub, and I'd stay in there, boil myself for about 45 minutes, and I'd do it again and again and again and again until I lost enough weight. So I figure I'm not going to lose it the day before the fight, I'm going to lose it 2 days before the fight. I'm going to be smart this time, and I'm going to make sure I'm as prepared to fight Carbajal as I can. So I finally stay in there for like 4 or 5 hours in the bathtub, and I make 108 pounds. And after that, I bought myself a little thing of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. So that's all I'm going to have after that, and then I'll just hold my weight the next day, which will be weigh-in day, and then I'll be able to handle it, even though the weigh-ins won't be until evening time. So I made 108 pounds, which I don't know how, and ate this whole big thing of praline, this kind of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and then I just couldn't hold it. I ended up eating that one plus one more ice cream plus another 10 gallons of water. I had to repeat the whole cycle the next day to make weight again. So I did 2 of those, making weight and losing 12 pounds or so, back-to-back days, to then fighting Carbajal the next day.
Yeah, and I hear you're going to...
All right. So, yeah, I fought him at 35%. So, you know.
Yeah.
So, but a great fighter. Great fighter.
Definitely. It was after your fight to Roman, though, and I didn't mean to skip ahead all the way. I was trying to figure out where you were politically and how tired you were of chasing that big money fight with Carbajal. I didn't mean to skip ahead right to that fight with Carbajal. I'm sorry, but when you did lose that fight to Roman, your next fight would be 10 months later on December 9th, 1994 for the IBO World Flyweight Championship against Roger Espinola.
Yeah.
What are your memories of that night in that fight, and what were you doing before that fight for 10 months?
Well, for 10 months, because I broke my I broke my hand again. Not, excuse me, Chris, not really severely, but I did break, I had a crack in it. So it took me, the 3-4 months to kind of get that feeling better, and it grew together fairly well. So during that lapse of time, we were trying to go for the biggest kind of fights that we thought we could get. And this one kind of materialized. I couldn't get a WBA fight, couldn't get I couldn't get the IBF title fight, couldn't get a WC title fight. So the IBO, International Boxing Organization, allowed me a chance to fight for the title. So they brought a kid in from the Philippines, who had a pretty good record. And I beat him for the championship. So having that belt, that was a real blessing to have. Finally be a world champion. Might not have been one of the big few belts that I wanted to get, being kind of held down a little bit, but at least I was going to be a proud fighting champion of whatever organization allowed me to fight for their title.
Yeah, sometimes the fighter's bigger than the championship belt. A lot of big, famous, popular fighters held the IBO title, so it's definitely it's not the bottom of the barrel, and a lot of times the fighter makes the title belt.
No, I love that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, sometimes it's not the belt that makes the fighter; it's the fighter that makes the belt. And I think there was only at that time about 2 or 3 IBO champions. It was just kind of coming on board as myself and James Toney.
Yeah, James Toney.
We were like the only guys that had it, I think. They were trying to find it. Maybe there was a lightweight guy, maybe, I think. Can't remember who that would have been. But, it was a little bigger up in Britain. Mm-hmm. It was a little bigger up there, but... I wanted to get one of the big 3, and I was in, I never had a fight that I shouldn't have been able to win. I lost my fights mostly due to circumstance, as opposed to not being good enough to being in there with them.
Yeah, and you fought 2 times in 1995. You won 2 decisions, a 10-round decision against Jesus Jimenez, and a 12-round decision over Jorge Luis Roman, in which you avenged your split decision loss from a little over a year earlier. Did revenge feel good?
Oh yeah, that was great. I was all over him. He took away a lot of money, and it was maybe the judge's fault too, because I thought I boxed the socks off of him. But yeah, he was he had it coming. So I bring him up and brought up his trainer, Nacho Berenstain, a great trainer from Mexico, great, Hall of Fame kind of trainer. They had Roman was in pretty good shape because he had been helping prepare Humberto Chiquita Gonzalez prepare in one of his training camps. So when I got to fight him, I actually fought him at one of his best conditionally wise times in his life, and he had already beaten me, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I want to put my title on the line against him if I had a shot too, so I did.
Yeah. Yep. And you had 2 fights and couldn't get a win or a loss in either fight. Instead, you got 2 draws, one against Jesus Zuniga, and in just 2 rounds. And what happened there? 2 rounds.
Well, 2 rounds. He was southpaw. I always had a bit of a hard time with southpaws ever since my Eddie Cook days. I always had a little bit of a tough time. But I was lunging a little bit. I was so prepared for that fight. I was so ready, but I was lunging a little bit. And my head got a little bit ahead of my feet, and my head bumped up into his eyebrow, and he was bleeding so bad in the second round there. It's actually squirting out on top of me, and they had to stop the fight, and so that was like a technical draw. And then the next one would have been up in Canada. They brought in this tough guy. His record was like a 50-50 kind of a fighter. Mm-hmm. I think his record was 25-25 or so. But fought some of the best tiny fighters from the Philippines. Tough little nut, left-handed too. Never did fight those left-handers very well. And and this guy come to fight and damn near killed me. So I retained my title in a draw. I think he probably beat me by a couple rounds, but they gave it to me on a draw, so I took that and run.
You're an honest man.
Yeah, true enough. No, that out of the couple losses, I know that I should have won against Cepeda and the first one against Roman. When I got to keep my title in a draw, it shut me right up. So I knew that kind of evened the score on the other stuff.
And that's big praise to Rudy Adano from the Philippines. Yeah. Tough guy.
Oh, patiently tough, real tough. Yeah, he could just crack, and. Yeah, at one point, I think he stretched me in about the second round, and they had this, one of the sponsors was this native Indian Aboriginal water, it was sort of sparkling water, it was called Spirit Water, and it had this newly created canvas with this thing painted on the canvas with Spirit Water. Well, anyway, my head hit my back of the head, being bald too, my back of the head hit the canvas so damn hard, it took my then trainer Jerome Coffey about 6 rounds to wipe the paint off the back of my head. That's how hard I hit the ground. And so yeah, I was very fortunate. I got a little bit lucky that I was able to keep it on the draw. That was good. I deserve that. It was an iffy fight, and it kind of, maybe the politics came back to me for a change. So, but I stopped sniveling so much about the other stuff.
Yeah. And now your next fight would be against the man you really wanted for 9 years. You wanted him after you're 23-0, and you got that setback loss. Now, you already explained the going into the Michael Carbajal fight. You were overweight, and you got the fight on 5.5 weeks' notice, right?
Yeah, about there, yeah.
And you wanted this fight so bad that you even went down a division to light flyweight. Take me back to that March night in 1997. You get your amateur nemesis into the pro ring. What do you remember about it?
Well, I remember, first of all, going into the ring, usually when I enter the ring in Edmonton, if I fight in my hometown here in Canada, I know sort of what's going to happen. If they might have a song being played, or there might be something going on. Well, I go to fight Carbajal. In that fight, so I'm fighting Carbajal. I don't have a very big dressing room to begin with, so. And who do I get to share my dressing room but Butterbean? So now myself and Butterbean in the same dressing room. Well, he's just one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. But the guy is huge, and he takes up a whole lot of room. So, and I was trying to kind of prepare a little bit, kind of bounce around a little, but there was just no room, so I had to wait for him to do his stuff. So, but a great guy. I love Butterbean. So, that's what paired me up. So I go into the ring. I finally get the, and I couldn't hear when you're so dehydrated. Your hearing kind of goes a little bit. Kind of goes like it's pluggy at times. And I walk through, and then boom, 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 boom. And they put on fireworks or some explosions as I'm coming out of the thing, the entrance. I had no idea that was going to happen. Scared the bejeebers out of me. So, anyway, so there's a lot of little things, and I did my very best. I fought, as best as I could under those circumstances. I think if I got to, 60, 70%, I think I win the fight. And it's hard to say, Carbajal stopped me in the 10th round in that fight. Then I'll always kind of wonder, was I so good at 35%, or was he just so good at whatever percentage he was that he carried me for that long? So, he was a Hall of Fame fighter, and I wish I had more contact with Michael. He was, between him and his brother that trained him, Danny, they were nice folks.
Yeah. Did you feel like your heart was in it the same way anymore after that fight?
I kind of felt, I wanted to win that fight, and I just, the odds were stacked so much against me, and I I was a little bit. I was smart enough to know that I was already defeated, but I was still going to give it a shot. You know, I always had that little bit of thought, you know, just maybe, you know, maybe I can lure him into a shot. But I was boxing decently, like I could dip and dive and roll a little bit, but I didn't have any punching power. I couldn't move Michael with the shots like I would move most of these other guys. And, you know, thus he didn't have much respect for a lot of my shots and was able to catch me in between my punches to the body, and that was a shot that kept me on my butt for the rest of the night.
Yeah, and after that fight, you return a few months later, and you score a stoppage after 6 rounds against a guy by the name of Jack Russell. So in that fight,
that was a great fight.
You had a bulldog against a Jack Russell.
That was a great fight, Chris. He was like an Australian champion or something. So they bring this cat in. He's just a great guy, great fighter, great camp, and. But I had a hard time making weight for that one too. Like, forget about 108 pounds. I could barely make 112. So it was one of my last kind of title defenses at 112. So as soon as I made weight, I went immediately to the hospital. And they inserted an IV and they rehydrated me through IV. So and they said, well, you're not fighting tomorrow, are you, Scotty? I said, yep, I sure am. Well, they advised me not to. I advised I ought to. There's people coming to see me. So anyway, so I fight Jack Russell, and he was a scrappy little guy. Broke my nose about the second or third round. I dumped him a time, and then I dumped him one last time. So I was able to win that fight. But yeah, he's a scrappy little guy.
Yeah. So the bulldog beat the Jack Russell. We know that.
Yeah.
Now. And then you
with a broken nose.
yeah. That's a bulldog.
Yeah, that's what I look like. Oh my God! Oh, what a disaster! Like he had this real speedy little left hook. So we both threw right hands. I backed him up to the ropes. I came down to about third, fourth round. I was going to stretch him at this point, so I lured my body back to the ropes, and we both threw right hands. We both missed. Well, we both came back with our left hooks, but his was just faster than mine. And boom, and he damn near knocked me down with that shot too. I stayed up, but by the end of the round, I finally knocked him down that round too.
Yeah. So you take care of Jack Russell, and then you stop Luis Briones in 3, and you seem to have called it a career. What were you doing after that fight that prevented you from being in the ring for almost 3 years, pretty much exactly to the day?
I was very loyal. You know, I wasn't being actively promoted by Top Rank right at that point. But I had somebody here that had helped me in a couple of the fights, and you know how the people promise you that they'll put on a fight. But I stayed very loyal and wasted a couple, 2 or 3 years of my prime there. Well, maybe not my ideal prime, but at least fighting years. And I couldn't and they didn't put on any fights for me. And I stayed very loyal, and it was a stupidity on my part, but. You know, it's kind of the person I am, and I don't know for sure if I could change that if I had to do it over again.
Yeah.
You know, they said they were going to put on the fight set, and I gave them every opportunity, and it just didn't. You know, I had to help myself at that point, and you know, and continue to fight.
Yeah. So at that time, you never thought of yourself as retired. You knew you'd be in the ring again one day.
Oh yeah, I figured it was just a kind of a matter of time. You know, I knew other fighters had taken time off, and I'd seen up till that stage, you know, whether it be not putting myself in the same light as Sugar Ray Leonard, but you know, taking off 2-3 years and fighting Marvin Hagler, you know, doing things outside of the box and training to make up for a lack of actual ring experience, maybe a little different sparring, things like that. I figured I'd be able to come back. I hadn't pulled the plug yet.
Yeah, and it does a fighter good to take some time off sometime, especially after you did it for so long, and it almost comes as second nature to you. I could think of Tyson and Ali, Leonard, like you said, Floyd Mayweather, Vitaly Klitschko. A lot of these people take time off and they come back pretty good. You did return on February 22nd, 2001 against Juan Manuel Chavez when you stopped him in 3 rounds. How did you feel after that? You're out of the ring for 3 years. How did you feel in your first fight back?
Well, it was a comeback fight, and and Chavez had fought a couple guys. I don't know. You'd have to look through BoxRec. I think one of those guys' name was Nicky Bentz, Bentz, who was a pretty darn good fighter. Yep. I think from more so California or so, and I think he had beat him before, but when he was brought up to fight me, I was a little concerned because his record was a little better than I felt like really fighting, and I maybe was a little apprehensive. Maybe I didn't have all my confidence right at that time. And I asked the guy who was training Chavez, is this guy coming to knock my pants off? Or said, no, Scotty, if you do your job and you fight the way you should, hey, you should beat him. If you don't, well, it's going to be a longer fight for you. So at least he put that into perspective. That it's not like the guy's coming in to take a dive or anything, and he's not coming in to try to blow me out in one round. So, but it was nice to know that I had somebody in front of me that I can put my hands on, that can just make sure that my help my confidence level. And I knew his record wasn't that great, but I never liked fighting, warm up kind of fights and tune up kind of fights. I didn't like that. I always thought the fans that paid for tickets deserved more than that.
Yeah. And then you take another full year off. What were you doing during this 1 year hiatus?
I was probably guest bartending. Yeah, probably guest bartending. I was making my little circuits around, and I was still looking forward to fighting. And again, I was still loyal, and things weren't quite coming around as I wanted them to. But then, I'm not saying that the phone stopped ringing, but the phone wasn't ringing like it used to.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't, I hadn't pulled the plug at that point yet. It wasn't do or die if I fought that within that first quarter of that year. Mm-hmm. So did that lead up to my last fight?
Yes, your last fight, you are in the ring again. Steve Molitor's the opponent, 9-0 prospect at this time, and you fight him for the Canadian Super Bantamweight title. Now, it's a few divisions up from your best weight. How'd you feel not having to stretch yourself and go the extra mile, having to make 112? You even made 108 that time, but to not have to make 112 and to be able to make weight more comfortably. Did you train as hard going into that fight?
No, but see, with my coach at that time, Jerome Coffey, and I love Jerome, and all he said leading up to the fight, and I was training, a handful of months before I got into camp. All he said is, be in shape to get into shape. So what I would do is I'd go swim I built up my conditioning so I could swim 2 miles. I would run for 8 miles upstairs on the track, so 8 miles straight, and then I'd run down and I'd get my swimming stuff, and then I'd swim 2 miles. So I built up to that. I had to do that on about 3 or 4 days a week. But I wasn't doing a lot of boxing stuff. I figured once I got to camp, the boxing stuff would come in. But once I got to camp, training camp was in Toronto to fight this kid, and I was moving up in weight, so the weight wasn't a problem. But when I got there, Jerome worked the hand pads with me a lot. And it was like my conditioning was so great, and I wasn't getting tired, and he just kept pushing me. And I was dipping and diving under his hooks and hitting and pushing. And anyway, I hurt my back. So for that year that I was off, I hadn't gotten hit once in the head. I hadn't sparred one round leading up to that fight with Molitor. So my resiliency was quite a bit down in that fight. Because I hurt my back so bad that I wasn't able to get any sparring. Couldn't spar.
And that's
but it was a little bit different with that one because usually I get quite a bit of I opted not to take the fight after a lot of the physio and stuff were taking just so much time away from my training. And, but, I was a bulldog, and I said, Jerome, I don't think I can take the fight. Instead of supporting me, he kind of got a little bit mad at me about that. He says, what do you mean, Scotty? And you're the bulldog. You got to take the fight. You got people waiting to pay to see a fight. And those little comments. Is, yeah, he's kind of right. I'm a fighter. That's what I do. I better step in there. But I shouldn't have been in the ring against some guy trying to make a name for himself. That's a little bit heavier, and I think I went into that one about 115, 118 pounds, something like that. So it was nice not to, it's well below 122 or whatever I had to make the weight, but it was comfortable.
Yeah, and you did get stopped in the 5th round. Did you know that would be your last time in the ring when you left the ring that night?
Yeah, that's what I felt. I knew even then. I knew I lost by circumstance, and had I been able to, in my mind, prepare the way I wanted to, because I was in hellacious shape, hellacious conditioning, leading up to going into actual boxing type training camp. And had that gone pretty smoothly, I think things would have been a lot different. I'm not saying I would have won that fight, but it would have been a lot different outcome.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been like it was.
Yeah, and you did have a great career and an exciting one. Are you content with how your career ended and how it played out for the people? Because you never did get that world championship, but you had that talent, and you know that by the guys that you trained with and fought in the amateurs. These guys won titles. You know you were just as good and better than a lot of them. Are you content?
Oh yeah, I have a very good peace of mind. The wonderful thing was really just being with Top Rank. With Top Rank, what happened was they allowed my fights. I had people gunning for me in the gym on a daily basis. If they were able to hurt me sparring partner wise enough to where I can't keep my television date on national network TV, they would have a chance to get my spot if they hurt me in the gym. So I fought for my life down there a lot of times, but they would always give me the opportunity to fight on TV. That gave me all of my fights are televised from my pro debut to the last fight, televised on some sort of network. So it's you go from you can have 200 fights off of TV, nobody really knows about you. You have 30, 40 fights on TV, and you build up a name. And to walk into a lot of countries, to a lot of places in the United States, and go back to Vegas and go anywhere, and you might not recognize me right off the bat, but if you mention my name, I'm sure there's quite a few people who still know about me.
Absolutely.
That's an honor. So yeah, this Top Rank did a really good job keeping me on TV for the fans.
And especially in what you recently went through with the medical scare, it was a real honor to be able to speak with you today. And you have many fans and concerned people out there. And you mentioned Facebook earlier. Your fans can reach you on there, I'm sure, right? I'm sure you're open and happy to talk and mingle with your fans on Facebook. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. That'd be just a blessing. The only thing, I have to create a fan page now. Yes. I'm not very good on this computer, but I'm up to 5,000. I've been up over 5,000 friends for a certain length of time here. And on a fan page, I could have unlimited people, but on my main page, I could only have 5,000. So try to add as my friend, and it makes it very difficult. Yeah. But yeah, if there's ever anything, I could give you an email address that people could send an email to me. So
you get that fan page going, and in the meantime, people can still send you private messages to get their message to you. And I'm sure Scotty would love to hear from you. He's still recovering, still got some ways to go, but you sound great, and you sound a lot better than you give yourself credit for. A real honor, Scotty. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it's better than I even imagined. And I'm sorry it went longer than I even thought it would, but you're a great conversationalist, and I appreciate the time you gave me.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry as well, Chris. My voice broke up a bit, but I had a tube down my throat for the better part of a few days, so kind of it created a little bit of a voice problem here. It's my singing. The singing voice kind of went on the fritz.
It'll be back, Scotty. It'll be back.
Absolutely a pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much for the opportunity to ask a few questions and for me to look back. I'm so just blessed that after a couple weeks and with the heart attack and the comas and stuff, and to be able to retain the things that I haven't thought about for a long period of time, to have it on the tip of my tongue as best as I could today. Hopefully I did a good job for you, sir.
You absolutely did, and I appreciate the time. Thanks, Scotty.
Oh, you're welcome. You take care. Thanks again.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Chris.